Well, hello, this is Dean Tenney. I'm coming to you from my studio in fabulous Las Vegas. We have made it to the final function 4.4 margin issues, 2, 3, max 4 questions. And this will conclude our explication of the FINRA Series 7 content outline. Hallelujah. So that means we will have finished the explication of the test specifications for the SIE, which is in the SIE playlist. We will have concluded the explication of the FINRA Series 7 content outline, which this will finish up. It's in its own separate playlist, not in the playlist for Series 7 exams. And then we have made a down payment on test specification 65. We've done a couple there, and we've done an installment on 66, and we'll finish those up. But this will be the last content I put to the channel until the third quarter. So we'll take a little break. This is for you, Joe. I know you're testing tomorrow, Monday. I don't think you're at risk not having had this completed before your test, but you've been a loyal person. I appreciate it. And so this last installment, which completes this, is Jim. He'll probably, when he takes his 65, 66, my guess is 66, he'll be on my butt to get that finished too. All right, characteristics. So minimum, stupid but testable, shows up on all the exams. The SRO minimum, the SRO, that means FINRA or the New York Stock Exchange, is $2,000. And so that is testable. Now, there's several versions of this as a trick test question. The first version of this is in a new account. So the phraseology you're looking at for in your exam is new account, initial transaction. That's the phraseology. So if the customer buys less than 2,000, the point is, why open up a margin account? He just pays in full. So, you say, hey, Dean, sounds like a wonderful idea. Let's open up a new margin account. Let's buy 100 shares at 18. I know how margin accounts work. I'll send you half, $900. I said, well, if you had an established account with me, that would be true. But, our minimum is 2. And you go, I'll send you 2. I go, why would you want to send me 2? Just send me $1,800. Now, the next version of this trick is the customer buys between 2,000 and 4,000. Again, the phraseology, new account, first trade. And in this case, the customer is going to pay $2,000. Pays $2,000. So again, in this example, you say, hey, Dean, sounds like a wonderful idea. Let's open a new margin account. Let's buy 100 shares at 30. I know how margin accounts work. I'll pay you $1,500. And I say, well, this was an established account. That'd be correct. But our minimum is $2,000. So between $2,000 and $4,000, going to pay $2,000. And the last version of this, there is no trick. So, 4,000 over 4,000, you just pay 50%. Stupid, but testable. I say, oh, I have a margin account. My manager says, you don't have a margin account until I approve it. So, by the way, that's not unique to margin accounts. All accounts require principal approval. So you're going to need principal approval for this. That shouldn't throw you for a loop because that's true of all accounts. Ineligible accounts, very testable. Retirement accounts are ineligible. Retirement accounts you have to pay in full. Those are cash accounts. Cash accounts means you pay in full. So retirement's the one they love on the test. It shows up on most draws is custodial accounts. What we mean there is UGMAs or UCMAs, Uniform Gift to Minors Act, or Uniform Transfer to Minors Act. Ineligible, eligible, well, if it's not ineligible, it's eligible. Ineligible securities is very important. There's 4 of them, but the big ones you need to worry about on the test are, let me get the 2 that are big ones. We don't lend you money to buy options. So you want to buy an option contract, you have to pay in full. And we don't lend you money to buy a new issue. And it's considered a new issue 30 days from the effective date. There's others, penny stocks, something that's not on the OTC margin list. I have a lecture titled Don't Overdose on Margin. This is an area where there's not a lot of payoff and spending a lot of time here. By the way, just remember an open-end mutual fund is a continually offering new shares. And so that open-end mutual fund is going to require that, you pay in full. Now, after you've owned it fully paid for 30 days, you could deposit it as collateral. We have to give you a disclosure document that tells you that leverage trading of the same supercharged speed you're going to make money with is the same supercharged speed you're going to make money with. About margin disclosure or suitability statement regarding margin and its hazards, its risks. Interest rate disclosure, very testable. The interest rate disclosure is known as the credit agreement, and that is mandatory. So there's additional documentation required to open a margin account, and one of them is the credit agreement, and that's where we disclose to you that you're paying interest based on broker call. You're paying interest based on broker call. That's called the credit agreement. And the customer acknowledges that they're paying interest based on broker call. Broker call is what banks charge brokerage firms for money. And so whatever the bank charges us, we're typically going to charge you a little extra. And that test question is mandatory. We also get you to sign the hypothecation agreement. That's where you will say you understand you're pledging your securities as collateral for this loan. Securities as collateral for the loan. As collateral for the loan, very testable. That means your securities are not going to be in your name. They're going to be in the name of the broker dealer. So in a margin account, you have no choice. The securities are going to be street name and the name of the broker dealer. And so if you don't fulfill your responsibilities, we can sell you out. Treasury securities, I wouldn't worry about. I brought up the mutual funds. The main point is Treasury securities is a function of maturity. There's no credit risk. You can borrow much more against a Treasury than you can other types of securities. Mutual fund, I told you, open a mutual fund. I can't lend you no money, buy a mutual fund. But once you've had it fully paid for 30 days, I can accept it as collateral. Classical margin accounts or calculations, classical margin equations or calculations. The classical long equation is long market value minus debit register, which is the brokerage firm, equals equity. I would know that classical margin equation. I think a good analogy is a house, right? Market value of the house minus mortgage on the house equals equity in the house. And you might have excess equity in the house, more equity than you need, and you can borrow against that, right? And the classical short equation that I would know is credit register. That's the cash you get from selling the borrowed stock plus the 50% you have to put with it. And that's called the classical short equation. So those are the two calculations I would certainly be able to recognize, if not actually do. Now, most of your study materials, I don't care who you're using, Kaplan, Past Perfect, Knopfman, STC, go way, way overkill on margin. And I just want to remind you, 2, 3, max 4 questions. So don't get too in the weeds on this stuff. But, I guess the good news, if you get margin down, you'll be able to get 100 because there's no way to really trick you. So initial margin is what you need to get going, right? So, if, for example, I have a customer, let's just make one up. And he says, hey, Dean, let's buy 1,000 shares at 40. So that's going to be $40,000. And as a margin clerk, I'm going to say, do you want to do this in your cash account or do you want to do this in your margin account? If it's in your cash account, I'm going to want 40 grand from you. But if it's in your margin account, you only need to put up half and I'll loan you half. And so the classical margin equation would look like this in a margin account. There's your long market value. I just told you I'm going to lend you half of that. That's going to be your debit register, which in this case is $20,000. And that will equal your equity, which in this case is going to be $20,000. And that's called perfectly balanced. So on day one, you're going to be perfectly balanced. Let's look at selling short 1,000 shares at 40. Or there is a locate requirement. And so, I'm going to have to locate that security. But once we locate the security, I'm going to get 40 grand from selling the borrowed stock. And then remember, Regulation T, set by the Federal Reserve Board, always says that initially you got to be at risk for 50%. In fact, let's go back up here and put that Reg T, which is set by the Federal Reserve Board, says customers initially, that's part of 34, by the way, need to be at risk for 50%. They could change that if they wanted to. They haven't changed it in decades, but that's what it is right now. So then if we put the Reg T requirement with that, that's going to be $20,000. And this is where most people get hung up in a short account. I'm going to have $60,000 in the credit register, cash, credit balance, credit register, 40 grand from selling the stock I didn't own, plus the Reg T requirement that I had to put with it. Now, the second ledger line in the calculation is still what I owe, but in a short account, I don't owe money. I owe securities presently valued at 40 grand. That's called short market value to distinguish it from long market value. And so here I have $20,000 in equity. And so those are the initial, what we call the initial setups, based on your initial requirement. The debit balance, as you see here, is what you owe your brokerage firm. Let's just go ahead and put that in there. And so debit balance is the loan from the broker dealer. It's called debit balance, debit register, DR. Money, the loan. Let's put that, call that the loan. That's probably the best way to describe it. Debit balance is the loan from the broker dealer. And then remember, you pledge your securities as collateral. It's a loan from the BD. And then the credit balance is the cash, as we said. A lot of people get hung up on that. The cash is remember the money you got from selling the stock you didn't own, plus the money you put with it. That's called the credit balance or credit register. And that is the cash. The cash from, come on. Cash from selling the borrowed stock. And the Reg G requirement. And the example I just put up there, it was 60 grand, 40 grand from selling the borrowed stock plus the 20 we put with it. So that would be your initial deposit, your margin call is that initial money. We said Reg T is set by the Federal Reserve Board. We said presently that's 50%. Margin requirement on long and short, we just talked about that. Reg T requirement for established accounts, excess equity. So excess equity, I don't think you'd be in trouble to think of excess equity and SMA as one of the same. It's not really, but excess equity is the amount you're above Reg T. It's the amount you're above Reg T. So, my example, let's say that we bought 1,000 shares of stock at 40, and now the stock went to 50, and now I'm going to mark you to market. I'm going to mark you to market. And so at 50, we're going to have $50,000 in long market value. You still owe the brokerage firm $20,000. That's the debit register. You now have $20,000 in equity. And then what I always want to do is compare, what you have in your account to Reg T. So right now, half of 25, half of 50 is 25. So I'm always going to compare what you have to Reg T. That where that 25 grand came, that's half of the market value. So I said, listen, I'm going to let extend you a $25,000 loan on $50,000 in collateral. That's the Reg T requirement. You've only borrowed from me 20. And so you have 5,000 in excess equity. And with that excess equity, you can have that as cash, or you can buy additional securities. And you say, Dean, do I have to do something today? I say, no. If I told you had to do something today, you might use this in a way that's not in your best interest. So I say, no worries. Tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to make a special memorandum to your account that on today you had $5,000 more than you need. The SMA is a holding tank for that excess equity. For test purposes, you could think of excess equity and SMA as the same thing. They're not really, but I don't think that would cause you any problem. And as I said, you can have that as cash, or 2 times that is what's called your buying power. And so right now, you could buy $10,000 worth of securities without coming up with additional money. So that's called buying power. So there you go, buying power. Now here, and it says in our outline, if you can you just deposit securities instead of money for this thing? You certainly can. A lot of people like to borrow against their securities. So, if you deposit, for example, $100,000 in securities, I always use Larry Ellison, right? He's got a $60 billion account, or Steve Ballmer. They borrow billions against their deposited securities, Oracle or Microsoft. And so, for example, if you deposit, I'll just make up a number. By the way, I have a great margin lecture. I know you think all my lectures are great, and I do, but some of them are better than others. And the margin lecture, don't overdose on margin, is all you need for test purposes. I don't usually say that. I usually say the lectures are supplemental, but I have some lectures I think are sufficient. That's one of them. So again, this is an explication. This is a margin lecture. I'm just giving an overview of things you're held accountable in the content outline. And this margin is 2, 3, 4 questions. Anyways, if you deposit $100,000 worth of collateral or securities, remember, it has to be eligible worth of eligible securities. I mean, you're not giving me an in the money option, or you're not giving me a new issue. Eligible securities, I will lend you $50,000 in cash, or I'll let you buy $100,000 worth of securities. So basically, you can have that as cash or the same amount in terms of buying power. I would definitely know maintenance. Maintenance is not set by the Reg T, right? Maintenance is what you need to maintain your account at the brokerage firm. House requirements can always be more stringent. They just can't be more lenient. And that's very testable to know that. So, the house requirement of Schwab, for example, is 40%. So you can always have that. It's 25% long and 30% short. Very, very testable. So every day I'm going to market a market. And if you don't have 25% of the market value in equity long, or 30% of the market value in equity short, you're going to get a maintenance call. But a maintenance call is much different than a margin call. A margin call is a call for initial money. That's not what a maintenance call is. A maintenance call is to maintain the account. And maintenance calls are due promptly. I'll never tell you what promptly is, because I want to say, sorry, that wasn't prompt enough. Additional purchases, we talked about using your buying power. We said you could withdraw your SMA as cash. If you're going to withdraw as collateral, same kind of a deal. We're just going to mark. It's called mark to market. I'm just going to mark the market. Same day, simultaneous purchases and sales. As a margin clerk, the way I'm going to handle that is by just netting the two numbers. Again, I wouldn't get in the weeds on this, but that's called the same day substitution, meaning I'm not going to deal with everything you did today. I'm just going to net those two numbers you bought and sold today, and that'll be the numbers a margin clerk I'm interested in. Let me. Same day substitution. Restrictions is when you're below 50%. So a margin account that is restricted is below 50%. I don't know who you're using as a provider for capital. Oh my goodness, we got some, Kaplan has some ridiculous, outrageous kind of margin questions. And you don't recognize the restriction, you get it wrong after you work so hard. But that's a margin account below 50% equity. Oh, come on. So below 50%. Equity. And when you're, the restriction is when you're below 50% equity and you sell securities, the restriction is you can only have half of the proceeds. You got to leave the other half in the account to pay down the loan. Another way to say that is a retention requirement. So, the other side of that would be, as a margin clerk, I say, listen, you can only have half, or another way I could explain that to you, whatever floats your boat, is there's a 50% retention requirement. Now, if you don't do that, this is the only time I make a entry to your SMA that isn't a function of market movement. So if you leave the money in the account, which is what I would prefer you do as a margin clerk, I'll credit your SMA for half. And that's the only time you get an SMA entry that is not a function of mark to market. Liquidate to meet a margin or maintenance call. You can meet a maintenance call 3 ways. You can give me cash. That's the easiest way to take care of it. Right? There may be 50 ways to leave a lover, but there's only, 3 ways to take care of this. You can deposit additional collateral. Remember, fully paid for eligible securities, or we're going to liquidate. And I don't think you'll see this, but if it's going to be liquidation, it's going to be the maintenance call divided by 0.25. Who cares? If it's additional collateral, it's maintenance call by 0.75. Who cares? I would just know there's 3 ways to meet the maintenance call. Remember, the margin call could be met with depositing additional collateral as well. I wouldn't worry about that one. This is the one you need to worry about. Okay, special memorandum. We said if you have SMA, we said you can use it as cash or 2 times your SMA as your buying power. Prohibited use of the SMA. People get hung up on that special memorandum I made to your account. And what they get hung up is they try and use it for something other than borrowing. You can't use this to pay down your debit. That's confusing. I think the easiest way to think about it is you can't use your excess equity line of credit on a house to pay off the mortgage, right? I mean, it's like trying to use a Visa check to pay off your Visa card. No, it's a function of borrowing. So once you're in maintenance problems, who knows, long ago in a far off galaxy, maybe you had some kind of a, SMA entry, but now you can't use it. We talked about deposit of marginable securities. Receipt of cash dividends. As a margin clerk, a convention I always follow as a margin clerk is that if you owe the brokerage firm any money, and any money comes into your account, we're going to be using it to pay down the loan. So as a margin clerk, anytime you have money coming into your account, will be used to pay down the loan. Now, if you don't want me to do that, remember, pay down the loan means pay down the debit balance. Or debit register, right? That's what that means. If you don't want me to do that, by the way, that'd be the same if you liquidate securities. So if you liquidate securities and I'm a margin clerk, I'm going to use the proceeds to pay down the loan. So it's just a convention of a margin account, a margin clerk that, I'm going to pay down the loan. Now, if you want the money, remember, no problem if you want the money, unless you're restricted. And then remember, all you could have is half. So proceeds are used to pay down the debit balance or loan. All cash. If you don't want me to do that, you got to tell me as a margin clerk not to do that. You withdraw cash or securities, that's fine. New margin securities purchased or sold short. Remember, you can't do anything with new margin. Remember, it's got to be 30 days. So if you say, hey, Dean, it went public a while back, I'd like to buy it in my margin account. I said, well, how long did it go public? You say 2 weeks ago, no, can do. 6 weeks ago, no problem. And that would apply to selling short as well. Now we have two other types of margin accounts, and I haven't anybody tell me they've seen them, but portfolio margin accounts, the minimum is 100 grand for that. And the advantage of a portfolio margin account is your maintenance calls are not due promptly, and they use dynamic margin scoring against it. So, if you have a put on the stock, you're not going to have as much of a margin requirement. And so that minimum for a portfolio margin count is 100 grand. And day trading accounts, I bet this comes up at Robinhood all the time. If you do 4 or more trades in a 5-day period, all these people are trading with their, cell phone, and they're buying, fractional shares at $50 or whatever the case may be. But if you do 4 or more trades, come on. You do, I'll try one more time here. 4 or more. Man, I don't know why it's not letting me change the color. Let's try one more time, and then I'm just going to move on. I'm going to give up. Yay. I'm trying to, by using a different color, I'm just trying to make clear what are my notes when you're watching this and what is actually part of the FINRA content outline. So you can kind of distinguish between, what's what. So that's why I'm trying to use different colors. But 4 or more trades in a 5-day period makes you a day trader. And that's going to mean you're going to have 25 grand. You get some advantage with that. Your SMA is going to be 4 times whatever you're above maintenance. Who cares? You also need to get a disclosure document or suitability statement, saying that you understand that, day trading is hazardous to your health. So suitability statement. Okay. Well, again, this is not the margin lecture. I'll probably pen I'm getting better, at, I don't know what better, relative to being able to do things in edit on videos. Right now, it's basically, I'm kind of a Luddite. I just kind of lay it down and I put it up there, but I'm learning how to tag it. And so what I think I'll do is in this one towards the end, so this is towards the end, you should see a tag to the actual margin lecture, which is much more in depth. Remember, these explications are just for you as a preview or review of the intellectual inventory that the either FINRA or NASA are holding you accountable for. So these are not meant as a substitute for a lecture or your study materials. It's just simply giving you an overview of the intellectual inventory that you need. One more point about the documents. I'm not sure I made that. Let's go back up here. And we had the hypothecation agreement. There we go. We didn't have here because it's not mandatory, but let's make sure we put that. Hold on just a sec. That's well, let's see if I was able to stop that. That was Mom checking in on her way back from church and was offering me lunch. So I apologize if that's coming through. I also have the studio door open, so there might be some background noise. I'm coming in from Vegas. It's 115, 16 degrees. And if you start closing up the doors, then the air conditioner has to do more work. And boy, if the air goes out, we're in trouble. But anyways, what wasn't here is the loan consent form. I just want to add that before we call it a day. And the loan consent form or loan consent agreement tells you that we have customers who wish to sell short. And that is optional. You don't have to sign that if you don't want to, because to be interested is not in your best interest to tell me that, you're going to help people establish short positions. So I would know to issue that the credit agreement and the hypothecation agreement are mandatory and that loan consent form is optional. Okay, so that concludes the explication, woohoo, of the Series 7 FINRA content outline. Make sure that you like, share, comment. I'm pretty good at returning any questions you may have about things. So if you have a question, make sure you just tell me, and I'm more than happy to answer those, either on the channel or wherever. Subscribe, because we're getting close to having a community page. That would be a cool thing.